1% podcast.
Okay, we're live. This is Matthew speaking. We're back with yet another really awesome and exciting special interview. Our guest today founded the largest digital goods marketplace in the world. Of course, I'm speaking with Devin Finzer, co-founder, CEO of Opensea. We're super honored to have you on our show, Devin.
Thanks for having me.
And then, well, if you want to give a little introduction of yourself, where you're from, like what you professionally have been involved in prior to setting up Opensea, I think that would be a nice little primer for everyone to get to know you a little better and about your really amazing project that you're helping to shepherd into the future.
Sure. So I was born in the Bay Area. I went to school on the East Coast and then came back to Silicon Valley to work at Pinterest. And interestingly enough, I was listening to the last episode of this podcast, and you had Danny Chu from Maker's Place. I actually used to work with Danny on the growth of Pinterest.
Small world.
Super small world. Yeah, we actually met up in San Francisco, and I thought we were just going to be talking about crypto. I knew that he was interested in crypto at the time. This was maybe 2 years ago. And it turned out he was also interested in this very specific piece of crypto, which was NFTs, which, super coincidental, but super awesome. So I was at Pinterest for about a year and a half, and then I left to explore startup ideas, spent a while just kind of learning about different industries with a buddy of mine, kind of building some small applications and things like that, and then finally built something in the personal finance space that was acquired by a company called Credit Karma in San Francisco, which is a credit reporting or consumer-facing credit score app. I was an engineering manager there for also about a year and a half, and I had always followed crypto and Bitcoin very peripherally, as many did in the tech scene in Silicon Valley, but I never really got super deep into it. And, it's kind of, I have the cliche story of a lot of people. So in 2017, as things, as that became the talk of the town in the tech world, I got curious, and I was kind of looking for something to do sort of at a smaller scale than working at a, Series D company. I wanted to do something entrepreneurial, and crypto was kind of this really exciting space where it felt like there were a lot of interesting things to be built that lend themselves well to smaller companies versus bigger, more established companies. I think for me, part of the reason that crypto was exciting was, it felt like it was I think people toss around the term disruption a little bit too aggressively sometimes. So they'll look at every new technology as kind of a disruptive technology. But I think, if you look at other sorts of frontier technologies like virtual reality and artificial intelligence, there's not as clear of a story why those will necessarily be bottoms-up technologies. I think a lot of those technologies will be pioneered by bigger companies, whereas crypto, it feels like there is this really strong reason that startups will be well positioned in the crypto space, and that the incentives are kind of misaligned for larger companies to build decentralized applications. So I think that was a really interesting thing to me, and kind of the reason that I decided to dive deeper into that space and kind of devote my career to it. And CryptoKitties, for a lot of people, CryptoKitties was kind of this moment where someone had built an application that wasn't just about financial use cases for crypto. It was a fun consumer-facing application that was just really interesting and cool. And I we kind of saw the things that were happening related to CryptoKitties. So other applications that were built on CryptoKitties, like Kitty Race and Kitty Hats, and it just seemed like a really cool thing. So that was kind of what inspired us to start building Opensea.
Devin, you guys really got your foothold in strong, like very early in the game, and it seems like no one's even scratching the surface of doing anything on the scale that you guys do. And when you started out, did you anticipate being sort of like a catch-all for all NFTs? And do you feel like as the space continues to expand, it's even possible to cast such a broad net, or how do you sort of see this playing out? Like, can you guys be like the guys for all of it, or at some point will you sort of have to choose a lane?
It's a good question. I think the NFT space lends itself to many diverse applications, building all sorts of experiences on top of NFTs. Like, that's kind of the magical thing about it. So I certainly think that already OpenSea is certainly not the only place to explore NFTs. It's probably, as you said, it's probably the one that goes the broadest. But there are a multitude of ways of visualizing, interacting with, and experiencing NFTs, which I think is amazing, right? I do think that but on the other side, what's also powerful about non-fungible tokens is the standardization of them, right? So now there's only a couple different. Ethereum sort of is the main blockchain for non-fungible tokens at the moment, and there's a couple different standards, but they all kind of behave pretty similarly. And then there's even standards evolving for how metadata is represented. So that does allow you to build applications that kind of horizontally scale across any non-fungible token. And so, like an event ticket can show up on OpenSea and be bought and sold without us ever having to go and figure out how that particular company decided to build their event system, or like how they decided to create the images and the metadata. They can just kind of comply with a standard, and suddenly it's available on a broad marketplace. So it's almost like it's a combination of the two, I would say. Like, right now we're in such early days that I think there is a lot of benefit to OpenSea being this kind of broad, almost Google-like platform where you can kind of find anything you're looking for. But then, of course, there's these more, applications that are tailored towards specific experiences. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's hard to say where we'll go in the future. I think we've definitely found a need for breadth versus depth. I think it's helping the space kind of mature and grow. And, our API now powers a lot of wallets that are trying to integrate with, show all of the different NFTs, but, don't want to go and kind of do the legwork of figuring out where all the smart contracts are and all of that. So yeah, I guess it's not a really good answer to your question, but I think you kind of get both, right? You get the ability to build very specific applications and these very broad applications.
Yeah. I really think that approach of, at least for now, of choosing breadth over depth, it's borne out by the numbers, right? I mean, you guys have over 4 million digital items listed, right? Over like 55,000 ETH in transaction volume, which is like around like $10 million in today's ETH. And then just hundreds of asset types. Like, it's the breadth is really incredible. I like that comparison with Google as well. It doesn't really feel like if I go to OpenSea, I can search the whole NFT space and find everything if I know what I'm looking for. But kind of like drilling down into those big numbers, especially the latter part, like everything that is listed on OpenSea. I'm just wondering if you could kind of break down some of like the emergent trends when it comes to like the different assets that are listed on OpenSea. Like, obviously games, tokens related to blockchain games or crypto games are really, really, it seems, central to OpenSea and one of the bigger asset classes or types. But I'm wondering if you could explain like all the other popular asset types that are on OpenSea and that have been emerging in particular over the last year.
Yeah, so I would break it down into maybe 3 different types of projects that I think have found pretty interesting product market fit in the early NFT space. The first, of course, is games. And then I guess within games, you have a lot of excitement around trading card games. So if you think about Magic the Gathering, which was a physical trading card game, not only was there the physical gameplay associated with Magic the Gathering, there was also an entire economy built around the cards. So, there are dozens of different sites where you can go and trade Magic cards. You can go and trade Magic cards in person. Of course, there's eBay, which is, the biggest of these sites. And so there's this whole, interesting economic component to it that hasn't really existed with other digital trading cards. Like Hearthstone, for example, is a pretty big digital trading card game, but their economy is, this kind of centrally controlled economy. I don't think you can even trade the cards in Hearthstone. So there's a lot of excitement around kind of bringing this new type of ownership to trading cards, and that's taken off with projects like Gods Unchained and Skyweaver recently. The other category within games is that I'm pretty excited about is virtual worlds, and these kind of blur the lines between games and just real economies where people are hanging out and doing things and being entrepreneurial and socializing and all these things. And CryptoVoxels and Decentraland are kind of the two examples of that I'm super excited about. CryptoVoxels is kind of the faster mover there, but Decentraland, is taking a little bit longer, but also has some really interesting stuff. And I think those will actually complement each other, even though in some ways they're kind of competitors. So I think bringing property rights to virtual worlds is another area where we're seeing some early traction and a lot of excitement. So that's the first category, would be gaming. The second category is probably, the one you guys talk the most about, and maybe the one that Opensea is less deep into, but we certainly are involved in some capacity, which is this idea of digital art and just creative work being put on chain. And so, it's been surprising and exciting to me that that's become a really interesting use case for this technology early on. And I think it kind of bleeds into these virtual world projects, right? So you guys talk a lot about the things that are happening in CryptoVoxels. I think, there's certainly interesting stuff happening there on OpenSea as well. And then the third is just kind of the entire space of other things. So one such project is the Ethereum name service, which is, you can kind of think of it as a building block for decentralized applications. So the Ethereum name service maps human readable addresses like alice.eth to a hexadecimal Ethereum address. And you can imagine that those types of assets would be really important for folks who are trying to build websites that are built on decentralized foundations as opposed to centralized foundations. So I think we'll see more. And then another example of this is like Urbit stars. So I actually don't really understand Urbit, but they have their own NFTs and, they buy and sell them on OpenSea. So there's, that third bucket is kind of a catch-all of just like weird digital stuff that, there seems to be demand for, and might be kind of stuff that is unimagined today entirely. And I think that's an area where I could see see some interesting things happening.
So I'm sure that third category is only going to expand, the weird bucket, which is always like one of the most fascinating buckets to me. At some point, I would assume, and maybe you've already crossed this bridge, you've got to make some cuts, right? Or say like, it's just not worth hosting this project anymore. This project has been discontinued and there's no interest in the market or anything like that. Is there a lot of that or not yet? Or how has that worked out?
So our philosophy has been, so it doesn't really cost us much to support a project, right? So as long as a project conforms with the ERC 721 standard and has and conforms to the metadata standard, they can instantly be viable, sellable, and viewable on OpenSea. So integration overhead is pretty much zero. I mean, I guess there's a little bit of server cost, but that's negligible. So we pretty much support every project that's not doing something illegal or just doesn't comply with our like pretty broad terms of service. We won't feature every project though, and we won't necessarily put every project in our kind of curated sidebar. So and we have it's a testament to how early days it is. It's not a like super rigorous process of like what makes it into our sidebar and what doesn't. But we will definitely kind of take something out of our sidebar if the project is defunct or like, it doesn't seem like this is something that people would really be interested in. And then we'll add things to our sidebar. We call it whitelisting, as new projects come online that, are doing really interesting stuff. But I think, my opinion, we should be in this stage of the NFT market. We should be pretty accepting to experiments that people want to try. When CryptoKitties, right after CryptoKitties, there was this period where there were a lot of, there were a few scams and like hot potato games, and we still see some of that. But for the most part, I think consumers have become a bit more savvy. They're not going to necessarily just buy anything, right? They know that, an NFT, they're not necessarily going to be able to sell something that they buy if it's not worth something to someone else, right? And so, we're pretty liberal about fostering a culture of experimentation within the NFT space as opposed to being like super exclusive. I think that, there's nothing wrong with exclusivity. I think that's a great model for these early art projects. I think, art curators like Super Rare, Maker's Place, Known Origin, their role should be exclusivity, right? So vetting the artist, making sure that it's actually who they say they are, all of these things. But Opensea is more just a broader approach where we allow all sorts of things to come in, and then of course we're going to weed things out if they are deliberately misleading users and things like that.
How do you, because essentially you guys are like the funkiest cryptocurrency exchange, basically, right? I mean, these are all like tokens that you guys are trading. Are you concerned about having to implement KYC at some point, or does the fact that it's, sort of digital commodities allow you to sidestep that for longer? Because I'm like super bullish on OpenSea, and I mentioned it in a previous podcast because I'm, was concerned about your servers exploding at some point once this market takes off, because I really think like the volume is only going to continue to increase as time goes on, which as I'm sure usually means like more restrictions in terms of KYC. Has that is that a thing yet, or has that come up, or are you in like a sort of a different pocket of what it gets under the pressure to implement that?
Right. So we're definitely in a nice area in that we're not trading things that could look much like securities, or if there are things that look like securities, we just wouldn't trade them on OpenSea, right? And so that definitely gives us a little more breathing room. But certainly, as the volume increases and as more and more people are trading, we'll have to be a little more restrictive about who we let onto our platform, and be a little more careful about when people are spending large amounts of money on OpenSea, ensuring that we comply with AML, KYC type restrictions. I think it's just, we basically operated, and most startups that, are building marketplaces kind of operate relatively leanly for the first, for as they scale their GMV and, start to hit million or tens of millions in GMV. And then, add on those sorts of restrictions as they get bigger. And I think we're kind of taking the same approach. And that's basically the advice we received from our lawyers is that makes sense while the market is small.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like with something like this, like I feel like KYC is sort of like it's a bad rap or whatever, but with something like this is sort of a unique wrinkle in the crypto sphere and everything. Do you feel like that would be detrimental, or do you feel like if you guys were to grow that big, like people would welcome it as some sort of like safety measure, like assuring you're getting a legit product, or I mean, obviously it's hard to predict the future, but just curious what your thoughts were of like how something like that would affect things.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm qualified to say, to be honest. I don't think it is at all a deal breaker for NFTs. I think there's benefits to NFTs that go far beyond the fact that you can trade them without having to kind of go through a more rigorous onboarding process like KYC. I think you can still have the interoperability of having open marketplaces that connect to the original game experience or whatever it is. So I don't think I don't think it'll like crush the space. I'm not super worried about that. That being said, I do think it is definitely additional friction for the user, which can be somewhat detrimental. And I think in the exchange in the token exchange world, there's been a lot of complaints about whether KYC actually is effective at preventing the things that it's attempting to prevent. So I know Shapeshift, I listened to a podcast recently with the Shapeshift founder who was just very, very anti KYC because, or I guess for a variety of reasons. I don't have as knowledgeable of a perspective on it. But I think if you do it in a way that's consumer friendly and, allow people to kind of transact with smaller volumes before having to go through rigorous checks, I think there's ways to handle this relatively gracefully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then aside from the user-based, I guess, identity checks or global regulation, one of the aspects of just verification that I've been thinking more and more about when it comes to the NFT space is just ensuring that the origin of the token itself. If you want to buy an Axie, making sure you buy an actual Axie and not some cheap knockoff that someone had taken the image from and is trying to portray as something else. Or same thing with crypto artists, making sure that if you want to buy a Cody piece or X copy or Hackatao, you're actually buying tokens that those crypto artists have created and not just a screenshot image that someone tokenized and is trying to pawn off as being the same thing. That sort of verification, I think, is going to become increasingly important for some of these larger projects, especially as either the game tokens or the digital artworks are beginning to command higher and higher sums. And I think a project like Opensea could become a standard if something was set up in terms of being able to quickly and easily verify provenance or origin or just the authenticity of these tokens. So I'm wondering on that front, do you guys have anything in the works to help better assist collectors and buyers to ensure that they're buying what they think they're buying, or any insights that you can offer into token verification and authenticity? I think that would be really interesting for our listeners.
Yeah, so we've started to, this issue has started to come to the forefront recently. So we had an individual create, so Binance actually released a collectible recently that was, a pretty hot collectible because it was it was created by Binance, and a user was actually able to create fake Binance collectibles that had the same metadata as these real Binance collectibles, and so to a user they appeared, roughly the same. If you looked at the address in the address bar on OpenSea, so when you hit a URL of a particular asset, you can actually see which smart contract it is associated with. That was different, but a non-tech savvy user isn't going to necessarily check the address bar, right? So what I think is exciting is that this is exactly what blockchains are extremely good at, right? There is a very simple way from a technical standpoint to tell whether an Axie or a Binance collectible is real or fake. And marketplaces like ours can essentially show people all of that information and ensure that people can easily check that this collectible is indeed an Axie or indeed not an Axie. So we've put measures in place now after this fake Binance issue to ensure that it's very difficult to create a collectible that will look exactly like another collectible. We basically uniqueify on the name of the collection. So if you try to kind of create a fake Axie, it'll be a lot harder for you to do that. But it's not a perfect solution. There's going to be folks that try to get around this, and so another part of the solution is we've sort of adjusted or we're in the process of adjusting our ranking algorithms so that anything that's not somewhat vetted falls to the bottom, and things that are a little more vetted fall to the top. Now it's a tough thing to kind of we have to be a bit careful. We don't want to. OpenSea does not want to become sort of the decider of what's good and what's bad. So if you create a collectible and it's not trying to be fraudulent, it's not trying to pass off as an axie, but we haven't like gone and vetted it, we still want you to be able to kind of discover those collectibles, even if they're not, the top notch Gods Unchained cards or what have you. So we're basically trying to find a middle ground, right? Where you can find all the collectibles you need to find, but things that are clearly fraudulent or even just illegal or bad in some way, right? Get completely hidden, but that it's still a pretty open ecosystem where you can create all sorts of stuff. So that's kind of the approach we're taking.
And then what does that vetting process actually look at? Like someone lists a new project, they need to wait like a certain minimum period for you guys to go through and manually check it? Or is there something that's more automated? What does that vetting process look like?
So it's a little bit in flux right now. We're changing a few things about how our search works in response to some of these fake collectibles. But for the short to medium term future, anything you create will show up on OpenSea, but if it's and be searchable, but it's a little bit harder to find stuff that has not been what we call whitelisted, which is essentially appearing in our sidebar. And then if you want your project to appear in our sidebar, you can reach out to us and say put it in the sidebar, and we'll kind of check that it's legitimate and put it in our sidebar. And that kind of scales for now, given that there's only maybe I guess maybe like one or two or maybe 3 or 4 projects per week that come online. So it's not that huge of an overhead for us to vet those. And then the other thing we'll be adding is flagging. So if there's a collectible that is illegal or is a ripoff of something else, then users will be able to flag these things. And those collectibles, those won't be a part of the OpenSea ecosystem because there's not really a valuable reason to be showing those types of things to users.
Cool, man. It's interesting. Dude, I have one more big question for you, and it's sort of a tangent, so I was like holding off to make sure Matthew was got his questions in about that. As I'm sure you know, Nifty Gateway was acquired by Gemini in November, and I didn't know a ton about that, and my brief research led me to believe that Nifty Gateway is essentially like a native on-ramp that people can pay with, credit card or whatever, to buy NFTs. But it seemed like Nifty Gateway basically just routes people to OpenSea. So I guess I was like, why wouldn't Gemini just acquire OpenSea and implement something like that native? Or why wouldn't you guys just implement something like that native? And I'm sure there's like a good answer. But I was just scratching my head after I looked at that. I'm like, they paid big money for this, and it seems like it's just routes people to you guys. Do people use it a lot, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we know the Nifty Gateways guys pretty well. They're actually 2 twin brothers, so just like the Winklevoss twins.
They have a type. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. In fact, there's a rumor that there might be a joint twin presentation at NFT NYC this year, potentially, which could be pretty cool. But anyway, so we worked with the Nifty Gateway folks early on, and they basically developed this kind of, as you said, on-ramp technology that allowed you to pay with a credit card, and then it would purchase it from OpenSea. They definitely hustled to get that out the door. They were super awesome to work with. Very they were working really hard on this, super passionate about it. And I think the reason it might have been a really good fit for Gemini was I don't think they had kind of figured out all of the fraud difficulties of taking credit cards. So that's really where things get a little more complicated, is that, for example, if you buy something on OpenSea with a credit card, but there's a chargeback, 30 days later, then if it was a big ticket purchase, now who's on the hook for the fact that the NFT is now in the hands of this person with a chargeback, and the funds are not in the hands of the seller, right? So that's basically the challenge of implementing credit cards. Now, what's happening now is there's kind of I would actually almost say a Cambrian explosion of fiat on-ramps to crypto. So there's Wire, MoonPay, Ramp Network, Carbon Money. I just met a new one the other day. So these are all companies that are basically trying to make it really easy for developers to onboard users from traditional payment mechanisms like credit cards and fiat into Ether. And what's nice about these types of companies, and they're still working out the kinks. So there's a kind of spectrum of what sorts of solutions they support, whether that's debit cards, credit cards, what sorts of KYC they require. But they're kind of taking on the risk of getting a user into crypto when they just have a credit or debit card. And then what's nice about our position is, as long as those on-ramps continue to get better, we can sort of just handle the crypto side of things. So we don't have to take on that fraud risk, which actually is kind of one of the biggest things that makes developing these sorts of marketplaces for digital items really difficult. And we're, it's a pretty fortunate position to be in a place where the payments that power OpenSea are these highly native internet money payments that, as long as a single transaction goes through on the Ethereum network, both sides of the transactions are satisfied perfectly, right? The buyer receives the NFT and the seller receives the ETH. And then we can sort of leverage these onboarding solutions that make that path to getting into the crypto ecosystem easier. And hopefully those get smoother and smoother over time.
Yeah, and then I guess just like the question I wanted to wrap up on was more product focused. And like, this is kind of like one of the most delightful aspects of like interacting with OpenSea for me. But because of the breadth that you guys have, it seems like you have so many features also tucked into OpenSea itself. I know you just kind of released, I think, bundles into the ecosystem, which is a really exciting advancement for people that hold a bunch of NFTs that want to sell off a lot at the same time, or if you want to gift multiple NFTs to one individual, it's easy to send multiple NFTs in these bundles. But you guys have the storefront product, which is a super powerful way for new people to onboard into the NFT ecosystem to create their actual new storefront and start selling their NFTs. And you also have bounties going on over there. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what are the sleeper products that you think are super powerful that you expect to get more attention or to shine more attention on as a company? Or if there are any up and coming functions or features that you have in the pipeline, I just want to give you the opportunity to highlight your product and all the different offerings you have in there, and anything exciting that's upcoming.
Sure. So some of the features I'm excited about, and I guess these all fit under the umbrella of core marketplace functionality. So that's really our focus, is we want to provide the most robust sets of tools for people, for both users and developers who want to have tradability of their assets, right? So over the last 2 years, some of those features are the ones you mentioned, right? Ability to bundle multiple items and sell them in one big bundle of stuff. Another big one has been a English auction feature. So setting a minimum bid and then allowing people to bid above that and then automatically sell to the highest bidder. Features that are in our short to long-term roadmap include things like bartering. So being able to, and this is a powerful one for card games, but being able to say, I'll swap this mixed set of NFTs for this other mixed set of NFTs, even though if those NFTs live across multiple different projects or multiple different games. That's one that we're super excited about. I'm not sure what the timeline will look like for that. And then we have a pretty long list of feature requests from OpenSea power users. One of the ones that is always at the top is ability to chat, so ability to contact another user and tell them that they want to buy one of their NFTs. So that's one that makes it up there quite a lot. And I think the one that's upcoming is better aggregation features. So I don't know if you use any of the card game experiences on OpenSea, but they tend to be a much better optimized for CryptoKitties, where each or art, where each thing is completely unique and completely non-fungible with the other things. For card games, it's a little bit different, right? You want to aggregate by a type of card and show that as a single entity and show all the different orders for that card. And then that applies to other sorts of games as well. So Decentraland now has these wearable outfits that you can take into Decentraland, and there's on OpenSea you kind of see hat, and you really want that to be aggregated. So it's a pretty simple one, but that one's interesting because it's going to come with a lot of improvements to the speed and usability of our search. We're super excited about making it easier for people to aggregate, discover, and better price their NFTs. And I think despite that not being the sexiest of features, it's going to make the OpenSea experience a lot better for some of these games where that is kind of how the assets work.
Nice. It's all about improving the experience. It's amazing to see that constant improvement within the product. It's just the hallmark of a great product, I think. But Rizzo, do you have any questions you want to close out with, or?
No, not really. I think I got them all out there. I mean, I feel like I could talk about this stuff forever. Any like really cool stuff in your own collection? I feel like everyone we talk to has their own stash of like cool NFTs and stuff. What do you like to hang on to?
Well, I'm pulling up my collection right now. So a lot of things that I have bought on a whim because I was testing something and it was cheap. So I was, I just decided to buy it. I'm excited that we got our unstoppable domains. So very sadly we missed out on OpenSea.eth way back in the day. So someone claimed that, and we have OpenSea.crypto for unstoppable domains. I bought a bunch of CryptoVoxel wearables. Haven't done much with them. Let's see, what else do I have here? I have a crypto stamp from way back when. Do you guys know about crypto stamps?
No, what's that?
Oh, okay, yeah. So crypto stamps were and are this experiment from the Austrian Postal Service. And what they did was they released real stamps, so stamps that you can send letters with, alongside a crypto stamp that you would receive in the mail, and then you could scan it and it would be some rarity. So there's the black stamps or maybe the red stamps are like really rare. And so they it was interesting because they kind of bootstrapped the collector market by tying these things initially to the physical stamp. But then when you receive it, they sort of break apart, right? And you can, if you wanted to sell the physical one, I suppose you could sell the physical one, but then you can go and sell the digital one on something like OpenSea, right? So yeah, it was kind of a cool experiment. It was popular for a little while, and then it's no longer super popular. But
that's cool. I never heard of that one before, but that's the third bucket, man. My favorite bucket with all the random interesting projects.
Yeah, definitely.
Before we close out, if you want to plug anything like for the community where they get outside of OpenSea.io, where folks can like dig into the community or get in contact with you, if you just want to share that, and then we can close out.
So our Twitter is @OpenSea, and The one thing I'll plug is we recently wrote a very long article about the NFT space. It's called the NFT Bible. It's quite a long read, but I think people both who have been in the NFT space or who are just starting to get deeper into it have said that it's pretty useful for getting an understanding of all of the different happenings. So that's pinned to the top of our Twitter profile now. Worth checking out.
Awesome. No, and that NFT Bible it's worth a huge shout out in its own right. And I think that is kind of like the beginning of a trend we'll begin to see this year, focused on this education and broader education and onboarding for folks that are new to the space, new to crypto, can take advantage of projects like Opensea, get on board and start selling these digital items and objects. So that's exciting. And well, Devin, thank you so much for your time and your generosity and sharing. I hope this is just the first conversation of many to come. And we're really, really excited for all the developments and awesome news that will come out of Opensea in the near future. Thanks again, and keep building.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yep. Thanks, man.
Podcast. Podcast.